This is Victoria Gordon, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Victoria Gordon's on the show. She is one of these Hollywood slash people born and raised in a show business family, went to show business schools, basically, because this is the only way it can be with the schools you went to. Degrees, all of this stuff. She is not just steeped, she's made of show business. And I'm so excited to have you on and talk to you about pilot season and all of the projects that you're working on. I want to give everybody the chance to look up your stuff. Basically, you just go to thevictoriagordon.com and you will start to get to know who she is, why she is. And thanks to Lori for setting this up. She's an awesome PR agent. She makes my job really easy. You should know that about her. So Victoria, tell us.
One thing about Lori, I adore Lori.
Yes.
My parents were both friends with Lori separately before they got together. She didn't set them up, but they were both friends with her separately. And so for them, there are a few people like that where they were friends of theirs because they all sort of knew from the same circles. And then to have my parents get married was like a big deal. So gotta love Lori. Gotta love Lori.
So again, you live in LA.
Yes.
And you're from a family that is music, acting, all of that stuff, writing, everything. So of course you're one of these Hollywood multi-slash people because, you know, you have to be able to sing, write, act, perform, all those things. What do you think your main slash is right now? Like, where do you see yourself being in 20 years when you're, you know, this established, you know, top of the marquee name and everybody's like, Victoria Gordon, so the best. Is she a producer? Is she a writer? What is she?
I think that's an interesting question because I've never really tried to put one over the others. I think part of what makes it fun is doing a little bit of everything. And so a lot of the women and men as well that I admire do a lot of things. Like, I don't know that you would necessarily look at Seth MacFarlane or Pamela Adlon or even like Tyler Perry and say, oh, well, they're one thing. I like that they get to do a little bit of everything. So for me, the goal would be to be known as someone who does all these things rather than just one of these things.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then when you went to school, you went to USC, correct?
I did.
How was that?
Well, USC was kind of interesting for me. I studied art history. I didn't study film. And I would take my classes during the day, during like normal business hours. And then I would do comedy at night at Second City. And I had a tough time blending in at USC. It's very much a football-oriented environment. It's, you know, they want to be a Southern university. And there's a lot of great stuff at USC. But for me, I would have probably thrived better in like a liberal arts college kind of setting. So it was about making the best of an experience that maybe wasn't the experience I expected.
Yeah, I can see that. But there are also a lot of art people there too. I mean, the film school, acting, there's so many people like that in your world. How did you do in that part of, or did you interact with that school at all?
You know, I wouldn't have if it hadn't been for my sister, because my sister is 2 years younger than I am. And she started at USC 2 years after I did. And she was a film major. So she had a ton of friends in her major. And when I started working on my different projects, they all wanted to get involved. So of course I brought them in. And some of them are still friends of hers and ours to this day and are working on projects I'm doing right now. And we keep up with what they're up to. So that's how I really broke into that world. Otherwise, I would have been perfectly fine just doing my work outside of school and going and taking my classes. And to be honest, I enjoyed having my major be different and learning from people who had no interest in this stuff beyond like, let's go see a movie. So I really am glad that I did it the way I did it.
Yeah, there's something smart about approaching your career with an adjacent degree as opposed to directly in it. I mean, obviously, if you want to get a degree in film, get into film, you know, that makes sense. But, you know, knowing about art history and understanding art in general and how it moves society, I mean, you're studying film. Like, it's just, you know, you have to understand what, you know, you could have a film history degree and you guys would overlap so much you could almost speak for each other, I would think.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, the joke with my sister is she would study films. And I was like, okay, you've got about 100 years, a little over 100 years of history you're studying there. We're studying thousands of years of history in my major. And if you look through some of what I'm studying in my classes, you'll see hints of it in your classes. You know, particularly in terms of like thinking about cinematography versus, you know, the way art is composed. I mean, there's just a lot to be learned. And I'm glad I studied art history because I find art so fascinating. And I've never thought about really incorporating the two. I know people are always like, you should write something about the history of art. It's more for me that I just love having this other thing that I love that has nothing to do with work that I can enjoy and have other friends who are part of that world too.
When you go to the Getty, so when I go to the Getty, I get through about half of it and I'm like, I've seen enough old chairs, you know, and I know it's incredible, but it blows me out. because you're an art historian, when you go to the Getty, are you able to get through more of the museum than I am? I mean, there's all kinds of interesting stuff, but I just, like another antique bureau. I get it. They're nice,
It's so funny because when I was in college, every semester I'd have a class inevitably where we'd have to write a paper based on an object that was at a museum in the LA area. So I'd be at Getty, I'd be at LACMA, I'd be going back and forth for one semester. I think I had one paper where I had a thing at LACMA and one at the Getty, and I would just go back and forth. And when I graduated college, I was like, I have spent too much time in these museums. I need a break. Like, I'm not going to another Getty, LACMA, whatever for I don't know how long. And then within about 6 months, I was like, I gotta go back. Like, I miss it so much. So I used to do like full on Getty days where I'd go through different exhibits and things like that because it's such a beautiful museum and beautiful grounds too. If you've never been, I highly recommend it when this is all over. But as I've moved past that, I tend to go for more targeted reasons. Regardless, I could easily spend a full day at the Getty going through art I've seen a million times, no questions asked.
Yeah, you're right. If you haven't been to the Getty, you need to go the next time you come out to LA because it will change how you see at least museums. I mean, this one was purpose built. It's in a gorgeous, you can't have a more gorgeous building and location for a museum. Not anywhere in the United States and probably not anywhere in the world. It is, the building itself is art, and the city is turned into art because of where you're at. So it is gorgeous, and the price is right at free. You have to pay for parking, but and when I say
there are two Gettys if you come to Los Angeles. There's the Getty
that's true.
And there's the Getty Villa, which is by the beach, overlooks the ocean, and that's all antiquities. So like Roman art, Greek art. That is in and of itself. If you go on a lovely day, like a really nice sunny day or something, you can't beat that experience. I mean, I guess being on the beach. But I will tell you a quick funny story. My great uncle was very involved in the arts community in Los Angeles. And in the 60s, when the Getty Museum, the original Getty Museum, which is now the Getty Villa, was being built, my great uncle was invited to perform a concert. He was a symphony conductor for the Getty family or like some event they were doing. So he got to go first to J. Paul Getty's mansion, where he said there was just like art on the floors. Like they didn't have enough wall space for all of his art. So they would literally just have like art sitting around in rooms, like stacked on top of other art. I can only imagine how amazing that was. But then the really cool thing is they had to build a special shell for the orchestra, for acoustics. And that shell was then demolished and that material was used to build the Getty Villa. So that's my little teeny connection to the Getty history.
I like it. Yeah, and your uncle was the conductor of the junior orchestra for like 70 years or something, I read.
Oh my God. My great uncle was a brilliant man. I just have to say that. He, at 22 years old, in the midst of the Great Depression, said, kids need something to do. And he was a talented musician, so he started a little orchestra. They had 4 members originally. And it eventually blossomed into what became the Junior Philharmonic Orchestra, which he conducted for about 70 years. And I mean, just to think about, like, there was never a charge for tickets. There was never a charge to audition, to be part of it. He provided kids with instruments, with clothes, but also like the thing, and he did also refuse donations, which is a minor thing, but it meant a lot because he really didn't want other people to feel like they had to be compelled. He really wanted to do something for the youth. But the thing that stands out to me the most about what he did was that there are people to this day who will say things like, your great uncle made a huge difference in the trajectory of my life. Like without his support and guidance, mentorship, the discipline of being in the orchestra, that sort of thing, I wouldn't be where I am now. And that's people who've done great things and people who are just, now happily adjusted members of society. I mean, it's just really amazing to think that he was able to do that. So I'm honored to be his great niece.
You almost made members of the orchestra sound like inmates.
I know. It's so funny. I sometimes am like, it's like we've all entered the asylum. Having been I was a member myself, so I can tell you there are times it's a bonding experience. It's like going to camp for a year. But at the same time, it really did make a big difference in a lot of people's lives. And I mean, even all the way down to years later, my great uncle got a call in the 90s about some kid. He was like, who is this kid? I've never heard of this guy. He's like, this guy Flea. Everyone keeps talking about Flea. Who is Flea? Turns out that before the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Flea was a member of the orchestra. And he actually came back to a concert after becoming, a super famous rock star because it had meant so much to him. And like, if anyone's a fan of Weird Al, Bermuda Schwartz, his drummer, was a member of the orchestra as a teenager and has brought Weird Al to numerous concerts and continued to come back well into my teenage years to play the drums occasionally. And he's a really good guy. So it's like these people had a situation where this man meant a lot to them and they were willing to make sacrifices in their, otherwise they'd be doing big professional opportunities. They were willing to come back to us because of how much it meant to them.
Just to illustrate like how deep the culture is in this city, a friend of the show, the guy who actually basically got us started going in this direction, he went to school with Michael Balsari, and he's like and he doesn't claim that he taught him how to play bass, but he was playing the bass and he was a couple of years ahead of Michael. And so, he's like, hey, how are you doing that? And there's a bunch of girls around James and he's playing the bass and everything. Yeah. But like, there's all these little things where at the same high school, it's Anthony Cletus and all these different people that are going to go into the arts in some form or fashion. And that's one of the things, like, that is why you are who you are, because it's like being in North Carolina and not getting into NASCAR. It's just not possible. Like you're born from a place where all these things come from. So when you go to your summer camp at the symphony, it's your great uncle, who's leading this thing and he's creating legends. Even if they get out of music or something else, they learn something about art and how to do it through him and through all these other peers. I mean, when your peer, one of the guys in it's a crazy story. So also at the same time as Flea, when he was just about to pick up the bass, was James was in a band with a guy named Saul, who ended up becoming Slash. It's like these guys are all in the same hemisphere, that same school, and it's like, so who has come out from your era that we would recognize in terms of like that? Yeah, this person used to be in drama and now they're this world famous director. Like, how have your peers progressed?
Oh, wow, my peers. Well, it's worth noting I'm 27, so my peers are still sort of finding their footing.
Right.
Recently, though, my school did induct Josh Trank into the High School Hall of Fame. I went to Beverly Hills High School.
Okay.
So we've got some pretty illustrious ones, but Josh Trank, the Fantastic Four director, whose mother was my school teacher and whose aunt was my first grade teacher, is now in the Hall of Fame. We've had some really interesting people come out, though, in recent years. I would like to think I'm one of them.
Of course.
You never know. My sister tells me all the time, this person we went to school with is Instagram famous now, or that person we went to school with is Instagram famous. So it happens. I think what we're seeing more from my generation, though, is an emphasis on more like career, like less of an arts career thing and more of like building a larger presence outside of LA. Like I think in previous generations, a lot of people, once they were in LA, stayed in LA because that was a huge deal. You came to California. And COVID notwithstanding, because a lot of our friends did come home during the pandemic, most of our friends have left the area. They're living in New York, they're living abroad, they're living in other big cities. Some of them are living in some small cities. I mean, there's a lot more travel and a lot less of a focus on let's all be in the arts and be famous entertainers. Whereas I think in a previous generation, like when my mom went to high school, it was all celebrities' kids. My mom also went to Beverly Hills High School. Her classmates were either celebrities' kids or later became celebrities themselves. That's less the case with my generation. There's less of a focus on that in my group of Beverly High alums.
There's one thing to be Instagram famous, and there's nothing wrong with that, or TikTok or any of those things. It is a modern way to do it. It's a whole nother thing to grab this thing and go and stand there in a gown and sing in front of people and be the center of attention, ideally with, thousands of eyes squarely on you, and they're all within 100 feet of you. I mean, that's a different kind of famous. So it takes courage. A lot of people in this town, right? They start out in that track, but they find out that they're better producing or assisting the producer or something else behind that microphone. Those few people that can walk through those curtains and take that 10-foot step, stride up to the microphone, it's a different ballgame.
Oh yeah.
Comedy and music, by the way. Comedy and music. That's talk about that. I mean, that takes some guts to go up there and do. I mean, some people say the one time I did comedy, right? And you're out there performing on stage in the major leagues in Hollywood.
It's a combination of factors that make it seem smaller to me. I mean, I grew up here, so it's not like a lot of people cut their teeth somewhere else and then come here. I wasn't going to leave to come back and do that. Like that wasn't logical. So this is where I grew up. These were my options. And to be honest with you, I've been the kind of person since I was very little. I always tell this story. My mom tells it really. When I was 2 years old, my great uncle used to have someone bring out a baton to him as like part of his show. So when I was 2 years old, she had me walk out with his baton. She just sort of pushed me out on stage and was like, go, be the little baton girl. I don't even know. I might not have even been to yet. And apparently I sort of toddled out and did what I did and smiled and was cute. And the audience was just loving it. And my great uncle was the kind of guy who was like very precision oriented. Like if you've ever seen the maestro on Seinfeld, I'm still convinced that there was an orchestra member who wrote for Seinfeld and created that character based on him. So he was usually like very in the moment. But my mom said even he had to stop and chuckle at this little girl walking out on stage, catching everyone's attention. Like even he thought it was charming. So from the time I was very little, or like my parents will tell anyone who will listen, when I was about 5 or 6, I had my first violin recital. I was a violinist as a little girl. And I don't know exactly what the deal was. I guess I was like playing at home. It was like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Like it wasn't hard music. So I'm just kind of playing at home and they're like, whatever, it's fine. It's a kid's recital. I get up there on the day of the recital and I like grab my violin and I'm like, I've got all this gusto and I bow like I just put on such a show for the audience. So my natural instinct is to do that. Whereas like in a, personal conversation, I might seem kind of shy, or I've been told I have an icy glare. So maybe I come across kind of, I don't know, mean, but when I'm on stage, that's just where I find my place. Or on camera, I enjoy that too. But I mean, it's just, that's my instinct.
If you want to find out what handed your kid is, but when they're about to play baseball, you throw a ball on the ground and you point it and say, pick that thing up and throw it as hard as you can. And whatever hand they pick it up with is what handed they are. And this is what happened for you. You're like, go on this stage and do this recital. You're like, and then you play Devil Went Down to Georgia with the ABC, tune.
Right? Yeah, no, it's just everyone has, and you can see it from a very young age too. I mean, like my godson is 15 months now and almost 16 months. Oh my God, he's getting so big. And I can see already the kind of person he's going to be, even though he's still in the very early stages of like walking, talking, getting his act together. Like it's already very obvious. And then like another cousin of ours sent us a video of her son when he was about the same age for comparison. And he's now 5, that child. So watching that video of him at 16 months, it's like, oh my God, I can totally see how Winston became who he is now. Like I can see his sense of humor. I can see his personality. It's just really interesting how from a young age, so much of who we are is already formed.
Yeah. And also the environment too. I mean, that has such a big, thing. If you're encouraged to express yourself, if you're encouraged to act out because you come from a family where that is how you express your thing, you become a different person than you might otherwise do. I mean, sure, there's a lot of DNA in all of us that determines who we are and what we are, but you come from a family of show people, and it's not weird to go up there and do the recital, or, it's just what you do. That's where you're from.
Exactly. And I think growing up in a family where people talk a lot and are loud and aren't afraid to express themselves. I was always a quiet kid. That was just more my personality in a one-on-one setting. Like if we were all together as a family, I would just sit back and sit quietly and politely and wait. So I think it was actually more of a shock, really, for me to get up there and be such a performer, because I was so not that in my personal life. And it's still kind of interesting to this day that I'm the most out there performer of my family members, and yet I'm also the most like introverted. It's fascinating, just to see how people grow up and what they become and how that shapes them. It's all fascinating to me.
I'm guessing that your heritage is Eastern European, like somewhere in Russia, Ukraine, or something like that, because there's a lot of performers that come out this way and they end up staying in Hollywood and is that true for you?
Yeah, well, I'm really into genealogy. So after a lot of research, I am, if you want to cut it down to this, I'm 15/16 Eastern European. So like it's a mix of Russian, Ukrainian, Lithuanian, Austrian, Polish. I am 1/16 Spanish, which is my grandfather's family. And my grandfather grew up in a really interesting time, because where and when he grew up, he really couldn't be very open about his heritage. It was like seen as a negative to be different, in the early 20th century. And he and his family were not really given the opportunity to express their heritage the way today we would encourage people to embrace their like native heritage. So piecing together his life has been really interesting for me, more so even in some ways than my Eastern European ancestors, because they were able to cling so much to their traditions. And learning about my Spanish family has been a trip. I'm really enjoying doing that. And yeah, it's interesting to learn really how much of a shame it was for them to be not like everyone else. And it's almost sad. I mean, looking at it from our perspective in the 21st century, that's not how I would hope anyone would feel. I mean, I know people do in certain areas, unfortunately, but it's really sad to think that that's how he grew up.
Yeah, I mean, that's I suppose that's true for a lot of people when they first get here or they first come to any kind of group. You have to figure out what you're allowed to do, and that can be scary. And then the group has to learn how to deal with you, and that can be scary. And so, yeah, these things take time. It's interesting that I don't know why I thought you were Eastern European in terms of your heritage, but it's sort of obvious in how you describe your family and what they've done and everything. It's almost as if people from Eastern Europe grabbed their violin and they came here with the arts as part of, their trade. They were less cobblers and more, violinists or cellists or actors or whatever. Okay, let's talk about your project that you got coming on. Yeah, let's talk about that and the genesis of it, and let's just get into it now. Pilot season, tell us about it.
So pilot season is 5 pilot readings that are being staged as like an anthology miniseries. But what's cool is we're not meeting in person. It's all being done over Zoom. So all the actors are in their own homes, reading their lines at the same time. We're filming it like live, essentially. There are no sets, no costumes. I mean, minimal costumes that people have, like things that they felt would work. We're using stock footage to sort of convey the mood. But at the end of the day, it's really just a sense of what these pilots have to offer. And there are 5 very different comedy pilots. One is like a broad multi-camera family sitcom satire piece. On the complete opposite side, we have one that's like a dramedy, very intimate mother-daughter story. In the middle, we have some single cams, one that's sort of built around these high schoolers, one that is about like a really dysfunctional wealthy family, and one that takes place in Antarctica, which is the one that we're filming tonight. I'm really excited to film that.
So this is more than a table read then. This is an actual performance with some, we'll call it effects. I mean, maybe they're special in this case, but we have some actual entertainment production going on.
Oh, definitely. And it's not just a bunch of people sitting there reading their scripts like this. Like there is definitely a lot more that goes into it. The thing we couldn't do, really mainly due to COVID, is create the world in the way that we would normally want to, in terms of like maybe we would provide some kind of backdrops or something that, I mean, Antarctica was going to be hard regardless. Like, I don't know how we would stage Antarctica without a massive budget, but the rest of it, we would try to incorporate more of that. It's just that we live in 2021. So we're doing it the way we can, but it's definitely somewhere between a fully produced pilot and a reading.
And then whose idea was this?
Mine. I'm home, and I'm a person who likes to be working and likes to be organized. And I did my first online show, which was a singing show, about 10 days after we got locked down. So I pivoted really quickly. And I had these pilots that I had written at different times, some of them more recently than others. And I thought, so let's do them. Like let's just put them out there. And I started talking to my friends, and a few of them got involved. And then it just sort of snowballed from being, let's just do a few little readings to, wow, we're doing like as close to a produced pilot as we can get without actually being together and doing it that way.
And is the goal to create and not get a pilot picked up, or is the goal just to continue to work on these projects and see what happens? What's the goal?
I would love to see one of these projects make its way to television, or streaming. There are a couple that I feel really would be timely and appropriate and fun for right now. And there are a couple that I feel have potential that are sort of they're all evergreen. There's nothing in there that's like so topical and so of a moment that we couldn't make it work. But there are a couple that I'm really, really hoping to see move further in that regard. And there are others that I'm hoping to see what we can explore more within. Like, for example, the multi-camera sitcom has actually been filmed before. Like, this is not the first time it's being shown this way. It's a new reimagining of the same concept. So I'd like to maybe see if in a couple years we can put it up on like stage or something. Whereas towards the end of the series, we have a couple of comedies that I think have great television potential. So it's an experiment, but it's also been a really good learning opportunity because no one knows what to do with these Zoom pilots. I mean, this is all so new, and we're making rules as we go along and learning a lot. And actually, one of my actresses, I have 3 people who are in 3 pilots, and one of them came to me and said, hey, I just want you to know that from working on your show, I got some ideas for this thing I'm doing with a friend of mine, and we're using some of what we learned from you to make that happen. And I'm like, flattered, because her thing's going to be great and I'm so excited. But at the same time, I'm also like, wow, I'm teaching people and I have no idea what I'm doing with this. So I'm leading the blind here.
Yeah, but I mean, that's how new media works though, right? Like you realize that, I mean, it's very common to do an audition on your iPhone and
All
just
the
send
time.
it in. Just grab your. They didn't even want to see, even before COVID. They didn't want to see you, and they're like, "Why are you going to come sit down for 2 hours?" While we just send it in, and we'll go through them, and we'll follow up.
Yeah.
Totally different thing that's happened in the last 5 years. It's we're evolving, and so if you're able to build an audience through your Zoom pilot process, and you just keep cranking out pilots and selling ideas, all of a sudden you've got this viable production company with this completely different medium to create your. I mean, you don't have to stay on Zoom forever, but why not? Like, how many pilots don't even get made?
Right.
Most,
Yeah, and I think it's
most.
something that would. No, I think it would be great to continue this format in some way. Probably not immediately. This was okay. So, like I've been saying to people the last day or so, I'm very proud of myself. I'm down to one role in the entire thing that has not been cast. There are 60 roles in the project. I received submissions from 11,556 actors for these 60 roles. So we're down to one role that still needs to be cast. The point I'm trying to make is that it's a huge undertaking. So it's something that the more I get into it, the more I'm like, we could do this again, realistically. I think it would take a few months off. We need to, this will be season 2. So we'll take a few months off to another season. But I think we have to come up with some, this was a first try. So nothing is permanent. And we changed from weeks. This is our 3rd week of taping tonight. We've already discovered things as we're going through. My sister is my editor. She's brilliant. And she finds things. She's like, we need to change how we do that when we film it next week. Because if I do that again, it's going to take me another hour to edit. Or like, it would go a lot more smoothly if we did this when we're filming instead of that while we're filming, because it'll just make everything look better. So we're all learning, and I'm glad to be on the front end of this.
Is that last role a ruggedly handsome middle-aged man who has a limp and has jokes but tells the truth a whole lot? Because I know a guy who does that kind of work.
You know what's so funny is I just cast a role kind of like that.
Did you really?
Not exactly, but I was casting a role of a producer who's kind of old school, and he basically berates our leading lady for being too young to play a grandmother. And she can't decide if she's flattered or annoyed because she wanted a job, but like she's too young. So like, shouldn't that be a compliment? So it's kind of a funny scene. And I wound up filling it with one of my like traditional stock players. If you're an old TV fan, it is Scott Lane.
Okay.
McKeever and the Colonel. So, and he's fantastic. I'm so glad to have Scott on board. But the one role left, if there's anyone out there watching who's curious, is for a 30-something guy who is like a young hotshot producer. So still looking for that 30-something hotshot producer. And then I'm done with casting. And I will tell you, casting is one of those jobs. I applaud casting directors wholeheartedly. It is a tough job. It is a lot of work. It is a huge part of world building, casting. And it is one of those jobs that I am more than happy to hand to the appropriate casting director, because as much as it can be fun, after a while, it's really not my expertise at all.
And the people that are really great at it, and I've not had really any casting people on, but I know some of them now. It's not that they have a lot of people; they have the right people, And they're like, it's one of these couple of people that I have, and I already know they'll say yes. So like the exact person or group of 5 or 6 people, and also that you have influence with them and they'll say yes to this project. Like there's really, it's a different level of the game with that. When you look at producing things in general, I love asking this question to folks that do projects and put them together. You always have to wear more hats than you want to, because there's never enough money. Apart from casting, what other hat would you love to get rid of and put on someone else's head when you do these kind of projects?
I will tell you, I know that this isn't technically a producing job, but I am ready to give social media and like digital media to other people. And to be honest with you, my focus is on the creative. Like I'm very good at being organized and making spreadsheets and getting all the credits lists together and all that. But sometimes when I'm trying to do so many things at once, I would just appreciate having someone else whose job is to kind of be there to help just take some of the work off. I've spent all day. This was yesterday, actually. I've lost track of the days. It's like that now. But yesterday I spent like most of the day working on a spreadsheet for credits and then inputting all the credits for one of the episodes and like loading that up and making it look perfect. And like someone else could be doing this job, and there are like 5 other things I'm not doing right now to do this. So it's really about having extra support. And regardless, I'm glad I'm learning to do all of it.
Yeah. You have to go through the process. You have to know how to do it so that you can pass it off and never have to do it again once you have enough cash.
Right. Exactly. And honestly, I've learned a lot. There are things that I've done that I thought I would hate that I've actually learned to really love. Like I've learned to love line producing. I mean, I'm not saying I want to be a line producer, but I've learned to appreciate it. And I've learned how to handle script supervision and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do those, but I know how to.
Well, but that's the idea, right? Like you get good at producing and you just start doing more and more what you love doing and let the other people who like costume design, I'm sure you could pull that off, you know, but the person who loves it is going to always outdo you. Like they're so much more passionate about it. They're looking at old fashioned. They're knowing the right jacket for 1982 as opposed to 1987, because there is a difference and they'll tell you about it. You know, these are props. Oh my gosh. We had Tony Toast on the show. And he's a director, producer, writer, right? And so he was saying he has the same kind of question. He's like, I've got new respect for the prop people because I'll write this period piece and I want a can of hair wax, I think he said. And then that prop person comes up with 3 options because I may not like the first one. And I have no idea how they even did that. And I'm paying this person to do something where I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't even begin to want to even do that, you know? And so these jobs, these professions, they're vital to this storytelling. And, you know, if a director or a producer says, I want the right can, you got to get it, you know, and it's a job that takes a lot of experience. So I can appreciate that. The desire to not have to line produce, the desire to not have to write credits and everything else, or how about not write emails? You know, here, write an email on this, send me what you got, and then I'll approve it or not, you know, because you need to be doing bigger stuff because the producer side that you're doing, that's without you, there is no project, you know?
Well, and I've said to my sister, it's taken us because she is very good at what she does, but my sister is extremely good at, she explains things a lot. Like she'll explain, she'll tell you the whole story of how if she went to the market to buy milk, you'll hear the whole story of how she got the milk, you know, where she parked, what the walk-in was like, all that. So I love her storytelling method, but sometimes it's a bit much. So I finally said to her, look, when you have a problem in editing, if I don't understand what you're talking about, I'm just going to get stressed thinking about what the problem is. So I would rather you say, okay, I had this problem and this is how I fixed it, than give me 10 different ways that you could fix it. I don't know the best way. So I think learning how to do some of these things is useful for that, but also sometimes reminding the people who are very supportive to stay in their lane. And my sister is so supportive that it's hard for me to ever be frustrated, but sometimes I'm like, nah, I don't know what you're talking about. Fix it, and then we'll talk about it.
Editing in art, oh my gosh, it's so important. You know, yes, you have a lot of great ideas. Give me your best one, you know, and it's I get approached by a lot of people who want me to pass scripts along to screenwriters. And what I ultimately do is I don't want to say no to anybody, but I know the deal. Like screenwriters don't want a bunch of unsolicited crap. So I'll say, you know, I'll give them certain walls to get through. Like you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And then I can introduce you to this person because it costs me. I want to introduce people all the time, but I'm not going to introduce people that aren't prepared to talk to the person they get introduced to. Does that make sense?
That's completely fair. And I think everyone should be that respectful. And I also think there's something to be said for acknowledging going in that you're making a big ask. I recently made a very big ask of a family friend, actually in regards to pilot season. And I said, look, I know this is a big ask. I'm making it very clear that I know that this could wind up being a very big ask. So if you feel that way, please do not take this as me saying that I need some big thing from you. If it's too much, I don't mind hearing that. So right. I think that there's a level of respect from the asker as well to acknowledge, hey, you know, this is not just me asking, could you pick up an extra thing of sugar when you go to the market? Like it's a big ask. Yeah. So it's about being respectful on both sides.
And that big ask, I'm not asking you to make that big ask. If you can get this done, great. If you want to talk about how we can ask together, great. You know, whatever it is, I don't want to say no to anybody that wants to meet somebody, especially if they've written their first script. But you and I both know nobody wants to read someone's first script because it's not good enough. You know, and if the fact that you think that it is shows that you don't know what good enough is. You know, so we have to work on these things. If you want to show someone your first script, go make the project and show them in its final form that you know how to write. If it's that good, don't give it up for free. Don't ask for any, you know, go make it. Go get $10,000 and make that stupid thing. Otherwise, get back to work. Write another script, review the old scripts, keep repeating until you know what great is. And then you won't have it. Because when Tony was talking about writing, he said, you know, having someone say that's a really good script is not good enough. They have to say, that's the best thing I've read in years. Because now they're behind you. Otherwise, they're like, yeah, that's good. Keep going, kid. You know, find someone who's interested.
Yeah, that's my one exception, by the way, is kids. You know, if a high schooler or something wants to talk, like, yeah, if you've just written your first script and you're 16, let's talk. Like, that's a great time to make that kind of ask. In fact, if anyone who's 16 is listening, that's a fantastic way to ask. I remember when I was in college, there was a writer on a popular TV show at the time who had a daughter who went to my elementary school, my old elementary school. I was in college. And I brought it up to a family friend who had a friend who was in the PTA at the school still. And she went to the principal and said, can we make this ask on behalf of Victoria Gordon? They were like, for Victoria Gordon, we can absolutely make this ask. So the principal contacted the parent of this girl and said, hey, we've got this really talented alum. We love her. We think she's wonderful. Could you talk to her? And I think that wound up being kind of a nice entree because it came as like, you know, the school is behind her. And this is someone that comes from the similar environment to where you're raising your family and maybe you can have some common ground. And that was really helpful. And that's the kind of ask that is hard to turn down because even if you're young, I was young, I'm still young, but I was young then. And it also had this very personal touch of, you know, community background. So, you know, whatever you can find is a good entree. I would say the worst way to do it is be like, hey, I watched this guy's podcast and now I want him to send my stuff to a screenwriter. Like, well, what's it? And not that there needs to be like a tit for tat, but why would he want to submit your work? And what can you offer that makes your work worthy of submission? Like, did this just win a big award? Are you young? Are you really old? Like, is there some hook? Asking can sometimes be really, and you have to acknowledge regardless that you're making an ask. And I know it's tough. I get embarrassed asking for things, but sometimes you got to do it. You just have to find the right way in.
And I should say, anybody who wants to ask me, you're welcome to ask me, Pete@breakitdownstraight.com, because what I'm going to tell you is the honest answer. Like, hey, you're not ready, you know, or whatever. One of the best ways to get your script read is to enter it into a contest. Boom, it's going to get read right then, guaranteed. So enter your script. And then it turns out the people that read scripts are wanting new scripts. Like they want to read new stuff. There's not a better path than that, you know. And then if you win these things, you instantly become known because you won a contest or you took 3rd or 10th. All those are wins in the script reading world because really good people read your script and said it was among the best of all they received. So submit your scripts to contests, please. Do yourself that favor.
I say this all the time. Look at this. This right here is a very powerful film tool. You're walking around with it in your pocket or your purse or in your hand. You're looking at it while you're walking. Don't do that. You got one right here. Use it. If you have some scenes you've written and you're like, I just want to see how this looks, grab a couple actors. I mean, it's easier normally, but grab a couple people you know and just put the scene out. And you will learn so much about how to compose a shot and how to put it together. I just think you cannot replace practical experience. If I hadn't had some of the practical experiences that I had with producing at the tail end of my college experience and into my early working years, I would not be where I am now. So don't wait for permission. Like, don't expect that the one way in is with some magical gatekeeper opening the doors and you can just walk right through. You have so much power in your own tools that you walk around with every day. So just go for it.
A lot of very famous people put projects on Vimeo. They put projects on YouTube. They put projects in a number of places that you have equal access to. You know, you may not have their name. People may not watch it as much, but you can put your stuff up in places. You can put your stuff up on, I mean, so many places. You can paper it all over Amazon, whatever you want. You can Roku. You put your stuff on Roku. So it's definitely possible, and people should definitely create that. You said that you're young. And I don't want to say that you're old. That's the wrong word. But you are experienced now. You're 27. Yes. When do you stop saying that you're young? When do you stop saying, you know, I'm still sorting it out?
Fair question. I definitely don't cling to that much. My point was more that I recently said to someone when I was young, and they were like, you're still young because, you know, you're in your 20s. Like, I have T-shirts older than you. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll take it. I tend to not rely on the young or old model, though. Like, okay. I feel like there is such a weird obsession with people being like the youngest to do something or like, you know, the first 14-year-old to do whatever. I mean, before long, we're going to be like the first fetus to, you know, write a screenplay that was nominated for an Oscar. I think I put too much stock in that because there is so much to be gained from experience and maturity. And I think back on things I did when I was very young, like even in like 16, 17, even into my earlier 20s. And I needed to do those things to grow and become who I am today. But they probably didn't need to be, I mean, sometimes they were public and that was wonderful, but a lot of it was just growth. You know, like I I sang, and I went through a big vocal change around like 23, which is relatively common actually for young women in particular, to sort of go into more of an adult voice at a certain point. And it's like, if I had spent so much of my energy trying to make my singing something earlier, I don't know that I would have been able to really convey who I am as a singer, because my voice wouldn't have been ready for it. So I don't really think of it in terms of like, let's talk about how young I am, or let's talk about how old someone is. Like, it's not a contest. It's not a race. Just be you.
And you can also say that it's really hard to outact Michael Caine. You're not going to be better than him. You might be a great actor yourself, but you're not going to outact Michael Caine. And you're probably not going to outsing Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett can barely sing. His lungs are so weak and so old. But I guarantee he kicks your ass. Almost everybody in the world loses the singing fight to that guy. So there's something to be said for some solid seasoning and working at your craft for a long time to adapt to whatever, a changing voice, an evolving body, whatever it is. These things are all things that artists have to sort out. That's why painting artists have different periods and everything. You sing cabaret. What an interesting choice for a young person. Who the fuck are you to take on that? It's like, come on. How did you come up with that? And fantastic, by the way. I love it.
Well, thank you. I always loved show tunes from the time I was very young. We used to drive around in my mom's car and listen to the XM Radio Broadway channel with John Von Seusten, if that makes anyone feel familiar. He passed away, unfortunately, but then it became the Sirius channel now with Seth Rudetsky, Christine Petty, all them. And my mom would have us identify the song, the musical, and the composer from a very young age. And we'd drive around with Sondheim CDs, or I think originally cassette tapes. So like, my family's really into musicals. And as I got older, that's what I loved. My voice gravitated towards that. I have naturally very curly hair, so Bernadette Peters was often talked about. And I love singing. So I tried to sing different genres at different times. I tried to sing country. I tried to sing pop. I was just never really into that. It always came back to show tunes. And then I read a quote maybe 5 years ago from Billie Lourd, who is Carrie Fisher's daughter. And Billie said that her grandmother, that would be Debbie Reynolds, was encouraging her to do a cabaret. And Billie said, "Grandma, no one my age does cabaret." And I was thinking,
right.
Why not? Why are we not taking this on? There's so much rich material there. And I looked at a lot of my favorite performers in that sort of theater realm, and they all started doing cabarets before moving into what I love, which is the symphony shows. And I just went, okay, fine, I can do a cabaret. So I did a cabaret, and it's evolved quite a bit from there. But I just think there's so much great material, and cabaret is such a creative form because it doesn't, people think, oh, it's just a bunch of like old music. No, I've seen cabarets feature pop music. I have seen raps at cabarets. Like, it can be pretty much anything. It's really more about the sort of overall show setup and the theater to an extent.
Yeah, I love cabaret. I love show tunes, and you're right. Just think about Michael Bublé. He said all of these crooners are going away. I love this music. There's still a market here, and he was right. If you're the number one young cabaret singer, we are younging you again. You can go out. I mean, there's I can't remember their name, and actually they sing sometimes with Michael Bublé. I wish I could remember their name, but there's like a Lemon Sisters act in modern times. They're not the Lemon Sisters, but they focus on, and they're from that era in terms of how they dress and how they sing and everything. But they smash, they kill. I mean, if people want to see that still, that's how great all of those sisters acts were from the 40s and 50s. They still resonate today. So go fill that void. Hell yeah.
Why not? Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, Billie, if you're out there somewhere, I know you've got a baby, but you would make a great cabaret performer.
I love it. What songs do you love to sing? Like, what are your ones you really, really love?
I love doing Sondheim. I have a voice for Sondheim. People always said Sondheim was really hard, and that just never happened for me. I would take a Sondheim song I had never done before and just nail it because I loved it so much. So Sondheim is a big one for me. I love Golden Age music. I did a whole show this past summer, that was a tribute to the Golden Age, and I ended with The Party's Over from Bells Are Ringing, and I just did a whole bunch of like vintage show tunes. So I love being more traditional. I think the 70s and 80s were also a golden age in theater. Pre-mega musical, like the whole London invasion thing in the late 80s. But I mean, some of the great works in the 70s and 80s, when you had like Stephen Schwartz and Andrew Lloyd Webber to an extent, and Sondheim, like really just putting out some of their best work. I rarely do more contemporary selections.
Do you ever consider taking contemporary selections and cabareting them? And then if so, what artist do you think suits to that kind of a new, like, who's great at that is Pomplamoose. They take songs and they are just, we've had actually Natalie Dawn on the show.
Oh my
I
God.
love what they do. It's so fantastic. And even if it doesn't all stick with me, when it does, it's so good. And I give everything a try because they're just so fantastic. So who would you want to cabaret or sing in that style that does music right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, I love Scott Bradley's Postmodern Jukebox because he's doing that. And I think it's so clever. I think I would probably want to take the music of my childhood, which is, the radio Disney pop, and really give it that kind of vintage spin. I think it's music that resonates with my whole generation. The millennials love their good old fashioned 90s Britney, NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, Christina Aguilera, Mandy Moore, all that. And I'd love to see how that could come together. Now, the trick is I'm not an arranger. I have an amazing arranger I work with, but I'm not an arranger. So it would be about finding someone who could really take that idea and help drive it forward.
How many minutes of the day are you singing? Just around the house, to your cat, all that stuff?
I'm a dog person. That should be very clear, just so you know. And my dog appears in all my shows. But I don't know that I sing a specific number of minutes every day. I try to do something every day. I do voice coaching with an amazing coach once a week. So that alone is easily an hour every week. But on top of that, I would say maybe 15 or 20 minutes just to keep my voice going. But I'm also the kind of person who will hear, my cousin's husband got me into this. He will hear someone say something that's a song lyric and he'll start singing that song. And at first when they got married, I was like, that's actually kind of an annoying trait. And now I've adopted it for myself.
Yeah, my poor significant other. I take songs all the time and put my own lyrics in it. I sing to the dog. I sing to the dishes. I sing like when I'm shaving. I have a shaving song that I don't even think about. It just comes out like I'm
What's your shaving song?
Huh?
What's your shaving song?
I'm shaving. That's right. I'm shaving today. Yeah, I'm shaving. It's a super jingly.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of things like that where I just, I enjoy singing like that, and I'm not belting that out. It's mostly to myself, but out loud.
I love it. I love that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Musicals. Are you thinking at all about getting on the stage when it's safe to do so? You have to say that for everything now, but go it. And I mean, one of the things I love about Southern California is between where you're at in San Diego, you can be on 100 different stages doing a live piece of music in 100 different styles, and so if you want to cabaret sing, there's probably 1,000 places for that, of various size and fantasticness. Do you want to do some musical stuff like at the different theaters around town, or what are you thinking about stage work specifically?
Well, my first dream when I wanted to become a performer was to be a Broadway star. So I wanted to go to New York and do the whole thing. And then I was in high school and I thought, I'm here, I'm not going to New York. So I might as well not limit myself. And I started doing acting that got me into like TV projects and things like that. And I haven't left since. But being on stage has always been a huge part of my dream. I've always dreamed of playing Mabel in Mac and Mabel. And I will tell you, last year I was in a concert right before the shutdown, like late February, almost a year ago exactly. There was a Sondheim birthday concert and I did Getting Married Today. And that's from Company. I want to play Amy. Like, I love that part. There are so many parts I would love to play at some point. I mean, I even love like the classics. I'd love to play Nellie Forbush. I love theater and I love to be on stage. I, of course, don't know when that's going to happen, but it's something I would eventually like to do.
I mean, we're getting there though. We're getting to the point where it's going to be, let me see, how do I want to say this? At some point here in the fairly near future, we're going to be able to get on stage and get into theaters and relatively safely get together. However, that doesn't mean all of us believe that it's safe. So right. How do you lead the way and not expose, you don't want to needlessly expose yourself. You're still young. You're 27. So you're probably last in line to get a shot and everything. Right. But what do you think? I mean, will we be able to fill a couple thousand people into a theater or a concert hall and have a show anytime in the next year? Will people be too terrified to do that? I mean, I think about these symphonies and operas that have just basically shut down, and all the people. I mean, okay, yes, the talent on stage, of course, but set design and, maintenance, all these things that no one's doing. It's just got to be tearing them apart because this is what they want to do. They want to work in theater. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's tough. I look at it from my perspective as a performer, and I think about all the logistical elements too. I think like my band, do I want wind instruments? Is that safe? Like, should I be concerned? Right. And then I start to think about like, well, do I want to use recordings? That seems kind of cheap. Like, I don't know how to really gauge that. And then I start to think about my family, and like, my parents are getting their second shot tomorrow, so they'll be fully vaccinated. But like, do I want them to take that risk and go sit in a big crowd? And it's thinking through all these things. It's going to take a lot of work. And what I think is going to happen is, first off, a decent portion of the population is going to have to be vaccinated. And we're going to have to see how the vaccines wind up working, how long they last, which is obviously still TBD, and also how they affect if someone does get sick. I mean, I think we've heard of a few cases now where people have gotten sick after being fully vaccinated, and it's been either asymptomatic or very mild. But we need to hear more of stories. And once we start to see, I think over time, okay, this is not going to, I mean, people who get this are not all being hospitalized. This is not, there is something safe happening. People are getting better. We can go more places. It's safer. People will start to get a little bit bolder. Maybe they'll go to theaters and they'll sit with, empty seats between them and like masks. And then maybe we'll start to fill in the seats more. And then maybe we won't need masks. And I don't know how long this is going to take. And I don't know what it's going to take to make everyone feel safe. I just can say that all we can do is try our best to make it a comfortable experience for everyone and to continue to give them opportunities to engage without being physically present.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's reasonable, and nobody has the answer. We know we all want to get back to it, but we have to figure out how do we limit the harm that doing it will cause. And then on the other side, by not doing it, we're harming ourselves. So it's like this never ending unbalanced thing. Yeah. So, I can appreciate you wanting to do that. All right. So let me just wrap this up. Any other questions that you want me to ask or that you want to ask me?
No, I mean, honestly, this has been such a great experience chatting with you. And I'm really excited to share so much. I think it's a ton of fun to just sit down for an hour and chat with someone and share stories. It's a blast.
Yeah. And when we're able to, I'd love to come up to LA and grab coffee because I come up all the time to do shows. It's just right now, it's not fair to anybody if I do that, so we don't do it.
No, likewise. And I love Orange County. I used to be a Disney annual pass holder. So I miss being in your area. I have a friend down there who keeps going to California Adventure, and I'm like, is it the same? And she's like, no, it's not.
Yeah. Well, and oddly enough, I miss hearing the fireworks at night because I'm close enough to Disney to hear those. And, it's part of the neat part of where we're at. It's never annoying, but I've been missing it. So yeah. Hopefully we'll get all that stuff again soon. Everybody should check out Pilot Season. That's where most of Victoria's work is going on currently right now. And you can see the link here on the website, or you can just go to victoriagordon.com, or you can check out
Victoria Gordon is
my apologies. Yes.
No, it's Victoria Gordon. So
right, please go to thevictoriagordon.com. And if you're on the podcast side, you'll see that in the show notes. Go to thevictoriagordon.com, Pilot Season, and check out what she's doing. They've got a pilot for Antarctica. I'm desperate to see that. I'm also desperate to see a remake of Gilligan's Island, but it would be a short thing because they would rescue them. But
you and my dad was just saying, we need another Gilligan's Island. I'm like, it's time. Unfortunately, with only, and I think you get Tina Louise to come in and do like a cameo as like Tina Louise, like some old castaway who's still on an island or something.
Yeah. Leave me alone. Don't rescue me. And then just in general, the Victoria Gordon, for all the things that she's doing. I just think the world of you. I love that you're out there doing it. I love that you're doing cabaret and that we were able to talk about musicals and stuff because it's one of my favorite art forms. I mean, I love opera. I love musicals. I saw Come From Away. Everybody was raving about Hamilton. I saw Come From Away and I'm like, that's for me such a great, like it blew Hamilton away. Like when you see something great, you see a lot of great musicals. Hamilton's a great musical, by the way. But you realize if you think Hamilton's great, go see more musicals. That's what I want to say. Because you're going to be like, oh my God, these people are incredible. Come From Away has people individually playing 4 or 5 roles. They're doing stage design have you ever seen it? It's so good. I have not seen
Come From Away, but I do love the story of Gander, so I really should see Come From Away. I think musicals, when you get down to it, are one of the most American art forms. They're an amalgamation of different cultures, attitudes, and musical preferences and styles. And it's really one of those things that is distinctly American. Even when we have musicals from all over the world, they come from this American tradition. And there's something so interesting about thinking about the fabric of this country and how it was really founded by a bunch of different cultures who banded together to create this particular art form. So if you like Hamilton, you should see all kinds of musicals. Go look for old musicals. I mean, there are some musicals that have some stellar, I mean, I love the Into the Woods tape. I think I watched that until it broke. Sunday in the Park with George is another one that's on video, but there are so many. Don't limit yourself to just things from the last 10 or 15 years. Look as far back as you can and you will discover so much.
Yeah, Long Beach, we went and saw Holiday Inn. That's a classic. There's so many of them. The other thing about Come From Away is it's 12, I think it's 12 actors, 12 chairs. That's all that's on stage. And they do all the rest with singing and writing and music and acting. And it makes you cry. I mean, it's such an incredible, incredible show. So everybody should go out and see musicals as soon as they can have them. That's my big plug for going out and seeing live art. For sure, go out and see the Victoria Gordon because you're going to love that. Victoria, thank you so much. Stand by for 1 sec while I roll this video.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.